You know, getting ready for this deep dive today, I
Yeah.
was rereading the guide, and
Right.
there was this one line that really stuck with me. It said, living with an alcoholic
Uh-huh.
is like living in the shadow of a volcano.
Oh.
And honestly, that just like that really captures the feeling, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
It's heavy, it's unpredictable,
Right.
and it's something that, so many people are living with every single day.
Mhm.
So today, we're going deep on this,
Yeah.
on navigating life with an alcoholic,
Right.
and more importantly,
Yeah.
how you can take care of yourself in the process.
Yeah. I think that's it's such a powerful analogy.
Yeah.
And sadly, so accurate for many people. You're right. The focus needs to be on both understanding, I think, what's happening and like equipping ourselves with the tools to kind of cope and thrive,
Hmm.
even in the midst of like a difficult situation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this guide,
Yeah.
it does not sugarcoat things.
Right.
It dives right into the reality that
Yes.
alcohol use disorder, AUD,
Mm-hmm.
is a medical condition.
Right.
Like, it's not a choice. It's not a weakness.
Right.
It's a medical condition just like any other.
And that's a point I can't stress enough.
Right.
There's still so much stigma around addiction.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to fall into the trap of blaming ourselves or the person struggling.
Mm-hmm.
But I think understanding the science behind addiction, the way it hijacks the brain's reward system,
Right.
can be a game changer in shifting our perspective from blame to compassion.
Okay, so walk me through this.
Yeah.
What's actually happening in the brain
Right.
when we talk about addiction?
Basically, imagine your brain has this incredible reward pathway.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
It lights up when you experience something pleasurable, a
Mhm.
delicious meal,
Right.
a good laugh, a hug from someone you love.
Yeah.
It releases dopamine,
Oh.
this feel-good chemical that reinforces those behaviors,
Right.
telling your brain,
Oh,
hey, do that again.
so far, so good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets complicated with substances like alcohol.
Mhm.
They basically hijack that reward pathway.
Oh.
Alcohol floods the brain with dopamine, but over time, the brain starts needing more and more to achieve that same level of reward.
Wow.
It's like turning the volume up so high
Right.
that that normal life just sounds quiet and dull in comparison.
Wow. That's a really powerful image.
Yeah.
So it's not just a matter of willpower of deciding to stop. It's like
Absolutely.
the brain's wiring has been altered.
Precisely. And that's why it's so important to remember that AUD is not a personal failing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a complex interplay of genetics environment.
Right.
And yes, those neurochemical changes we just talked about.
Which leads to those behavioral and physical signs the guide talks about, right?
Mhm.
But it sounds like
Yeah.
understanding this biological component can help loved ones approach the situation with more empathy and less judgment.
Absolutely. And that understanding can be a source of strength,
Mm-hmm.
both for the person battling AUD
Right?
and for those who love them.
Yeah. It's like suddenly you're not dealing with just the person,
Yeah.
but also this like almost separate force that's kind of driving their actions.
Right.
It's no wonder it creates so much
Yeah.
tension and confusion.
Exactly. And that confusion often spills over
Right.
into those behavioral and physical changes the guide talks about,
Mm-hmm.
those telltale signs of alcoholism.
Right.
They can be so hard to miss once you start seeing them.
And this is where that guide
Right.
really gets into the nitty-gritty,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
It actually gives this example of a woman named Sarah
Okay.
who starts noticing
Mm.
her partner, John, is acting differently.
Yeah.
Like he's constantly tired,
Yeah.
his eyes are always bloodshot,
Mm-hmm.
and he's putting on weight.
Yeah.
But what really gets her attention
Yeah.
is his drinking.
Yes. That's such a key point. The guide uses
Yeah.
Sarah's story
Yeah.
to kind of illustrate
Yeah.
how these signs often manifest
Yeah.
in subtle ways. At first,
Yeah.
like John's drinking gradually increases
Mhm.
until he's having a few beers before work,
Right.
something he never used to do.
Right.
He brushes it off
Right.
and says he's just stressed, but Sarah
Mm-hmm.
can sense something's off.
Like the signs are there,
Right.
but it's easy to explain them away or convince yourself
Yeah.
it's not a big deal, especially if you don't want to believe it.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to be aware of those less obvious signs as well.
Mhm.
Not just like these stereotypical images of someone passed out on a park bench.
Right.
Like the guy talks about how mood swings
Mm-hmm.
can be a big indicator too.
Yeah.
1 minute John's cheerful,
Yeah.
the next he's irritable and snapping
Yeah.
at Sarah over nothing.
And probably blaming everyone but himself, right?
Exactly.
Which is another sign the guide points out.
Denial is a powerful defense mechanism.
Right.
So John might become defensive whenever Sarah tries to bring up his drinking,
Right.
minimizing the problem, blaming it on her for nagging.
Mm-hmm.
It's all part of that cycle of addiction that can be so hard to break free from.
So what can you do?
Yeah.
In a situation like Sarah's where those signs are starting to add up
Right.
and you're feeling that anxiety building.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to say, like, recognize the signs.
Yeah.
But actually, like, doing something about it
Right.
is a whole other story.
You're right. Knowledge without action isn't enough.
Right.
And this is where that piece about self-preservation that we talked about earlier
Mm-hmm.
comes in.
Yeah.
Because when you're living with someone
Yeah.
struggling with AUD,
Right.
it's incredibly easy to get swept up in their chaos,
Yeah.
to lose yourself trying to fix them
Right.
or make things better. But the guide is very clear on this point.
Yeah.
You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved.
It's that classic, like, put your own oxygen mask on first scenario, right? You can't help anyone if you're drowning yourself.
And that's where
Yeah.
those 7 practices for living with an alcoholic that the guide outlines
Mm-hmm.
become so crucial.
Right.
They're not about controlling the person with AUD,
Right.
but about empowering you,
Right.
the person living in that volcano's shadow.
Okay, so let's dive into those.
Okay.
Because I have a feeling this is where things get really practical.
Right.
So these 7 practices, they're like tools in a toolkit.
I love that.
Right.
Yeah.
Each one designed to kind of help you navigate this situation
Right.
with more awareness,
Right.
strength, and honestly, a little more peace of mind.
I love that analogy.
Ah.
And just like any toolkit,
Right.
you might not need every tool all the time,
Right.
but knowing what's available to you
Yeah.
is half the battle.
Okay, so let's unpack these tools.
Okay.
Where does the guide suggest we start?
Well, it really emphasizes the importance of setting boundaries.
Okay.
And this is crucial because
Yeah.
when you're living with someone
Yeah.
struggling with AUD,
Right.
those lines can easily get blurred.
Right. Yeah.
You might find yourself constantly cleaning up their messes,
Right. Right.
making excuses for their behavior,
Yeah.
or sacrificing your own needs to kind of keep the peace.
It's that whole
Yeah.
walking on eggshells feeling,
Exactly.
never knowing what's
Yeah.
going to set them off.
Like those eggshells, they eventually crack.
Yeah.
Setting boundaries is about
Right.
reclaiming your space,
Mm-hmm.
your sanity,
Right.
and protecting your own well-being.
So how do you actually do that?
Right.
Because it's one thing to say set boundaries,
Right.
but like in the heat of the moment
Yeah.
with someone you love,
Yeah.
it can feel impossible.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It's not always easy.
Right.
It takes practice
Yeah.
and honestly a lot of courage.
Yeah.
The guide
Yeah.
gives a really helpful example, actually.
Yeah.
It talks about how Sarah, in that story we discussed earlier,
Right.
finally decides to set a boundary with John about his drinking.
Okay.
She tells him
Mm-hmm.
she won't tolerate
Okay.
being spoken to disrespectfully when he's been drinking.
Right.
And if it happens again, she'll be sleeping at her sister's.
Wow. That's a big step.
Yeah.
Does she actually follow through? Wow.
And that's the key with boundaries.
Right.
They only work
Yeah.
if you're willing to enforce them.
Yeah.
And it wasn't easy for Sarah.
Right.
She felt guilty, worried about John's reaction.
Right.
But ultimately, she knew she deserved to be treated with respect,
Right.
regardless of his drinking.
That takes so much strength.
It does.
And it makes me think about another one of those practices the guide mentions,
Yeah.
seeking support, because you don't have to go through this alone, right?
Absolutely not. In fact, reaching out for support is probably one of the most powerful things you can do when you're navigating this journey.
Right.
It could be talking to a therapist,
Mm-hmm.
confiding in a trusted friend,
Yeah.
or joining a support group like
Yeah.
Al-Anon,
Right.
which is specifically for loved ones
Yeah.
of people with AUD.
I imagine those groups can be lifesavers.
Absolutely.
Just having a space where
Mhm.
people really get it without judgment.
And what's so valuable about those groups
Yeah.
is that they offer not just support,
Right.
but also practical advice
Right.
and coping strategies.
Yeah.
Because as you said,
Yeah.
it's one thing to know you need to set boundaries,
Right.
but it's another thing entirely
Yeah.
to actually do it.
So it's about equipping yourself with the tools
Yes.
and the support to navigate those tough moments.
Absolutely.
To prioritize your own well-being,
Yes.
even when it feels impossible.
And that leads to what I think
Yeah.
is the most important takeaway.
Right.
From all of this,
Yeah,
you are not responsible for someone else's addiction,
right.
but you are responsible for taking care of yourself.
Such powerful words.
Yeah,
And it
yeah.
circles back to that image of the volcano,
Yeah.
right? You can't control when or if it erupts,
Right?
but you can control how you prepare for it
Absolutely.
and how you protect yourself.
Exactly.
And sometimes that protection might mean creating distance,
Right.
even walking away for your own well-being.
It's a difficult decision.
Yeah,
But as the guide reminds us,
yeah.
sometimes the most courageous act of love
Wow.
is choosing yourself.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
that's a powerful message to end on.
Yeah, is it?
It's a reminder that
Yeah.
in the midst of chaos, your well-being matters.
It does.
You deserve support.
Yes.
You deserve peace.
You do.
And you are worthy of a life free from the constant fear and uncertainty of addiction.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thank you for listening to this
Yeah.
incredibly important deep dive.
Mm.
If anything resonated with you today,
Yeah.
if you're living in the shadow of that volcano,
Right.
please know you are not alone.
You're not.
Reach out,
Yes.
seek support,
Yes.
and remember
Mm.
your well-being
Yes.
is worth fighting for.